Yeah. Okay, whenever you're ready.
I will go ahead and call to order this meeting of the Eastern Delaware County Joint Recreation District. Can I get a roll call?
Ms. Watson.
Here.
Mr. Coy. Here. Ms. Greiger.
Here.
Mr. Elliott. Here. Mr. Muzacchio. Here. Ms. Sabata.
Here.
6 present. We have quorum.
The first item on the agenda is minutes the meeting minutes from our last meeting on June 5th, 2025. Is there a motion to approve the minutes or any discussion?
I'll motion.
Second. Ms. Greiger.
Yes.
Mr. Elliott. Yes. Mr. Muzacchio. Yes. Ms. Sabata.
Yes.
Mr. Coy.
I'll abstain.
And Ms. Watson.
Yes.
5 yeas, motion approved.
All right, the next item on the agenda is public comments. No, is anyone? No one physically present would like to make any comments? I don't know. All right. I think we can move on to the next item, which is unfinished business and a project update.
Yeah, just wanted to provide an update on the request for qualifications, and I did include in the packet the updated version that's out on the street right now. So applications from interested consultants are due on July 7th. We've set a committee or subcommittee meeting for July 9th. Ms. Sabata and Mr. Muzacchio, myself, just to talk through the process. And I'll make sure they have copies, and they'll go off and score it, and then we'll reconvene at a later point to try to form a recommendation. The goal is to have a recommendation to bring back to the board at the July 31st meeting. I do know that at least three consultants have contacted me directly that we've pushed it out to, that indicate that they are going to submit their qualifications. So we'll see if they all do or not. But again, others may still be interested. We're fielding questions, not getting a lot of questions necessarily. I think hopefully it's relatively straightforward for them. But again, if anybody approaches you, again, do not meet with them during this period of time in which the RFQ is out on the street, and direct them to me, and I can help assist. Yep.
The question. So you had mentioned that there are firms that are asking questions. Are we publishing those questions and the responses so that people that are interested can see all of those?
Yeah, I mean, we have a deadline. I think it's a week prior. Any questions that are submitted, we'll provide a response and put that up on the website as well. The questions that they've been asking really are, can I get the materials? I'm interested in this. We'll probably be submitting a proposal. That's mostly it. They're not, I think maybe one question was about a contract. If you have to submit a contract, who would that be with? So that's probably the one that we will have to provide a response to. What we're generally asking is, could they provide their standard consultant agreement, just so we have something to work from? I mean, that may be the document we ultimately sign, but if we don't like that, we can certainly do our own contract. So.
Okay.
And will the full board be getting the submissions that we receive, or are you waiting until the next meeting?
So the plan was to submit to the subcommittee all of the documents. They would do the scoring and review them, and then come back with a recommendation. Now, we can certainly provide as information to you. Maybe if that's helpful, I can certainly do that. Yeah.
I think it would be helpful just to have
Just so you know in advance, kind of
through things before
who's being considered.
might
Okay.
be more efficient.
And then as a reminder, we did try to build in a little bit of time if the scoring committee wanted to call them in for interviews, if there are two or that we like or something like that. I mean, there is time built into the schedule to allow that before we get back to the full board on the 31st. Doesn't mean that the board has to act on the 31st. I'm just trying to schedule it so we can get back with at least some kind of recommendation. We also will have to work through the funding issue as well. Now, again, we won't know at that point. The goal is to identify the consultant first, determine who it is we want to proceed with, and we'll execute a scope, or we'll work on a scope and a fee structure, and that'll ultimately be what gets approved by the board. So again, that'll probably require going back to the political jurisdictions and asking for some additional funding. So
I have another question. So you had mentioned that we might ask someone to come in and speak. Would that be open to all to come in, or just the individuals that we select?
So for the committee, the committee could choose to have everybody come in and present if we wanted to. It's important to note that when they come in, though, that you're not supposed to be asking them for supplemental information, right? They can't supplement their application. They can basically describe what it is that they've submitted, the qualifications that they've submitted. So sometimes there could be questions about a qualification, but if it's not in the proposal, the interview process is not generally designed for that purpose. It's just designed for them to tell you what's in their proposal, what qualifications they have submitted to the committee. Yeah. It's unlikely that the results are in before the October 31st request of the exploratory committee, but that may be another reason to begin to set the stage a little bit with the political jurisdictions on where we are with the schedule. I do know that I had been talking to the mayor. I think we do want the Sunbury representatives probably at a council meeting here relatively soon to talk a little bit about how it's going. So I'll reach out to them. So, but for the others, you may want to reach out to your respective jurisdictions and get on the schedule at some point.
Yeah, and Todd reached out to, I also spoke with him, so to let him know that it's coming, so we, it's not a surprise and they can plan for it appropriately.
Wonderful. All right. That was it.
I think the next item on the agenda, if we're ready to move on, is the community profile data in the meeting packet.
Was there don't put.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. Oh, sorry. The next item on the agenda is actually new business, and resolution number 2025-11, a resolution adopting conflicts of interest policy. So, Mike, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Who doesn't love a good discussion about ethics? So as a refresher, as board members on a public entity, you're all subject to Ohio's ethics laws. The proposed policy you have before you allows for a documented annual acknowledgement, essentially, of potential conflicts that it would be important for board members to raise to maintain those high ethical standards provided by the Ohio Revised Code, and to ensure that no decision is made by the board in conflict with Ohio's ethics laws or in a self-interested manner. So starting with section 2 of the conflicts of interest policy, you'll see it attached to that resolution as Exhibit A. It defines an interested person, what constitutes an interest, and then it also provides a definition of compensation that's more than just monetary remuneration. But the policy essentially provides that if a board member believes that they have a conflict of interest regarding any activity of the board, that they're to report it to the chair and the vice chair and recuse themselves, withdraw from any decision making or activity related to that potential conflict of interest until the conflict of interest can be addressed. In section 3, paragraph B, right? Paragraph A is that duty to disclose. Paragraph B then goes on to how the chair and vice chair can analyze a potential conflict to ensure that no decision is made with a conflict. If the board chair believes that maybe the person who raised the concern, that there is a legitimate concern after discussion with internal discussion with legal counsel, then that there's a provision for the member who raised the concern to be brought back in to decision making. There's also a process that if it's the chair that potentially has a conflict of interest, that they're to report to the vice chair, or if the vice chair is the interested person, then they would report to the chair. So there's additional checks and balances being proposed by this policy to ensure that no conflicts arise. And then what's alluded to in the last section, section 4, is the final page of the policy, which is that each board member will sign an annual affirmation stating that they don't have, to the best of their knowledge, any conflicts of interest, and that they have received, understand, and will comply with the conflict of interest policy as additional security for the board in preventing and hopefully addressing any conflicts if they arise. So happy to answer any questions about the policy you have before you for your consideration for adoption, or any other conflict of interest related questions.
Any questions?
Nope. Straightforward.
Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
Make the motion to approve the resolution.
I'll second it.
Real quick before we do the roll call, do we want a physical signature on this copy?
Yes, please.
We'll collect today.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll scan them and we'll save them for future reference.
Great.
All right, Mr. Elliott,
Yes.
Mr. Coy,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
Ms. Sabata, Mr. Mizakio,
Yes.
Gregor,
Yes.
6 yeas, motion approved.
All right, moving on to the next agenda item is the community profile data.
Yeah, so we, at the last meeting, we had talked a little bit about the election results from 2007, when this joint recreation district issue was on the ballot before. And we talked about maybe gathering some additional information about what the demographics of the community look like today. So I pulled for you the community profiles that are on the Delaware County Regional Planning District or Commission's website. So and we use the same data to help divvy up the expenses for the JRD as well. So based on this population sizes for Berkshire, Galena, and the city of Sunbury. So thought it would make sense to pull the same source or use the same source. So, you know, maybe just a couple of things to call out as it relates to the profile itself. And then I did gather just a couple other pieces of information that I thought might be useful to share. So for Berkshire Township, and this is an updated April 2025 profile from the Delaware County Regional Planning Commission. So the Berkshire Township is just a little short of 7,500 projected or estimated for 2025. The Village of Galena at 1,650. And the city of Sunbury at 7,900. So, I mean, the relative sizes of the jurisdictions has not changed significantly. In terms of median age, Sunbury has the youngest median age at just a little over 33. The oldest median age is in Berkshire at 38, 38 and a half. So Galena falls right in the middle there. When you look at median household income, it ranges from 92,000 in Sunbury up to 136,000 in Berkshire Township. Again, with Galena in the middle of that. So a relatively wealthy population, subject or participating in the JRD. I did pull the median home values as well. So they range somewhere in the 400,000 for Sunbury, 500,000 Berkshire, Galena at about 480,000. So that's the range, at least with respect to median home values. And then I pulled, like I said, two other pieces of information. I just tried to get a sense of kind of how much of the population is within some sort of age range, right? We know the median ages, but what does the population look like? The way they break it down in another document is I basically say anybody between 27 and 60. So this might be maybe the prime market for who might be participating in the athletic or recreational or health benefits of a joint recreation district. In all instances, 44% of the population in all three jurisdictions, so it varies by about a tenth, but roughly 44% of the population falls within that age group across the district or the JRD district.
What was that group, age group range again?
So between the ages of 27, so basically the millennials and the baby boomers. So between the ages of 27 and 60.
You said you have this on slide here?
Now that's a separate one. When the storm came through, the server went down, and so there are a couple of things that didn't get printed out, but
No worries.
like I said, there were just a couple other pieces that I pulled, and so this is one of them. And the other one that I pulled that I thought might be interesting as well is how much of the housing stock has been built in each of the jurisdictions since the last vote. So this is, I couldn't tie the population. I couldn't find the population as of 2007. But I can kind of get close to how many new housing units have been built in each jurisdiction since then. So if you think about it, 43% of all housing units in Berkshire Township have been built since the last vote of the Joint Recreation District. So that's obviously a sizable number. Galena, 35.4% of all units have been built after or since the last vote. And in Sunbury, it's just a little short of 35%. So 35. So in all cases, at least a third of all new housing units have been built since the last vote in front of the JRD. So it'll be a very different, which I think is the point. It'll be a very different electorate than it was, back in 2007. Also keep in mind the boundaries were different in 2007 as well. So there are some townships that that will not be in the pool for the voting this time that were in the pool the last time. But anyway. Yeah. So just a couple of other pieces of information. When I get I will forward to you the documents that have those two additional numbers on it that you don't have in front of you. So you've got it for yourself.
The like the percentage of people that turn up to vote roughly, if you don't have that.
Yeah, I didn't go to the Board of Elections site to look at that, but let me do that.
Okay.
We do know, again, from the last meeting, how many people voted in each of the precincts,
Right.
But let me see if I can find the most recent data. I'll probably pull it for different types of elections. So if we're on a ballot next
Off-cycle.
year,
Yeah.
that would be a congressional year. So maybe we'll look back at something like that. Okay.
So would we, if we were to get to that point, would we just go on the next regularly scheduled election ballot?
Well,
Or-
Multiple.
do you want to answer
Yeah,
that?
depends on when you would like to be on the ballot.
That's what
So it would be possible to potentially be on the primary ballot or on the general election in November ballot. There are some cost considerations depending on what else is on the ballot. Since it will be a congressional year, there will be a primary. So I think that there'll be more cost sharing amongst all of the political subdivisions that will be on the May ballot, as opposed to this year, for instance, where there wasn't, there was a Democrat primary, but not a Republican primary. So any entities that wanted to put something on their ballot in their local jurisdiction, they might have had to pay the cost of doing so for the Board of Elections. So there's a choice about when to put the levy on the ballot. And then you might want to think about what other agencies will also be on the ballot with you, in addition to just different offices. For example, if the school district has a levy on the November ballot. Maybe you'd prefer to try and be on a different ballot like the May ballot. And then they're depending, regardless of which ballot you choose, there are election proceedings that have to be undergone 90 days in advance to certify any potential levy for the ballot. So that's something to keep in mind as well, is that if you're looking to go on to the May ballot, we'll want to be potentially getting the election paperwork in order towards the end of this year for May. And if you're going for November, then we'll be probably assembling that summer of next year.
I mean, that would be pretty tight. I mean,
It would be tight.
yeah, maybe it'd be very, very tight. So, but yeah, but a valid point. And it's good to at least understand the range of options.
So am I understanding then that the general election has the potential to cost less?
There might also be different types of turnout at different elections. So a general election in a congressional election year, you might have a lot more residents turn out. In a year like this year where you have your local elected offices on the ballot, it might be a smaller amount, as there's maybe not as much federal attention to the election, so it might not be as high a turnout. The opposite, though, could be true for certain particular issues. I mean, there are certain years that school districts like to target to put their levies on the ballot, for example, and those can, or if there's a hot button issue in a local community, that could potentially drive voter turnout as well. So that's something to keep in mind, and the demographics of voters that might be likely to come out for a particular election.
Yeah, but I'll pull the I'll pull the turnout numbers for that. I'll pull them out for multiple years, so maybe you can kind of just see what the differences look like. As Mike indicated, I mean, you know, the fact pattern can be different with every election cycle. So
Do you have like a general like ballpark figure for what it costs to get something, or like a range? If you don't, that, I mean, I understand.
I don't want to speculate for a general election. I think it would only be several $1,000s. But again, it depends on where the election is being hosted, what issues are going to be on the ballot in the different precincts, voting precincts. But for a general election, I think the bulk of that is paid for by the state.
I assume like Preservation Parks, and I know the fire department, when they did the new fire station, has a consultant that comes in that knows these affairs. You probably would need somebody, right?
Well, from a self-interested perspective, Berkeley Region does represent many political subdivisions on election proceedings, preparing all of the paperwork you need to be on the ballot, and then assisting with financings that might come out of those election proceedings. Generally, that's if a political subdivision is not handling the certifications to the Board of Elections in-house, they're usually relying on legal counsel.
About funding and what we may need for that.
Yeah.
Where does that usually run as far as, I mean, can you give us an example on the cost of that work? I mean, is there?
Probably 10 to 20,000, probably closer to 10,000. It also depends on the type of election proceedings. So if you're doing a bond issuance, asking the voters to approve a certain amount for a bond. So depending on the nuances involved in the election proceedings, that determines the cost.
We use bond proceeds to pay for those, like retroactively. Is that, I don't know if that's a.
Not for election proceedings, but for legal costs
Consulting work type.
So, leading up to a bond issuance, yes.
And then can we do, I guess we can raise the money however we wanted to, technically. If we, whether we got it from the three governmental agencies or we had donations, is that a possibility also to help pay for some of those legal costs?
So as a governmental entity, you can accept donations. You also have the ability to request appropriations or intergovernmental transfers from the political subdivisions. Sunbury, Galena, Berkshire. Think that the cooperative agreement that Sunbury, Galena, and Berkshire would probably be your primary source of funding for initial annual legal fees. But I think to Mayor St. John's point 2 meetings ago, it's important to, as the political subdivisions are developing their budgets for the year end, to approximate what you might require as far as consulting fees, legal fees, auditing fees for next fiscal year, so that you can maybe make those requests now and those subdivisions can budget for them. Once you have, say for instance, that you wanted to put a levy on the ballot, that would, if it were passed, depending on the purposes that you're putting the levy on the ballot, some of that money could be used for general operating funds in the future. It just depends on the purpose that you put the levy on the ballot. But then you would be receiving semi-annual property tax settlements from the county auditor at that point.
Fiscal year is regular calendar year, correct?
Yes.
And then when are the budgets, I guess, finished and finalized? Do we know that?
Yeah, so they need to be done before the end of the calendar year. I can say for the city of Sunbury, I mean, we're going to begin the internal budget discussions next month. But we won't be in front of our council with a budget for another 3 months or so. So September-ish, probably a good time to be
I think
working with them.
we need we'll need the names of the finance directors for each entity too, if we can get that.
Yeah, because in my mind, we were really I was thinking that it was the cost to do this market study that was going to be the big expenditure, but we have a lot of other things that we.
Yeah, it wasn't, I'm glad you brought all this up because I didn't know it cost money to get on a ballot, so.
Same.
Split, you said the money to get on the ballot is one bucket and then the money for the consultation is in a separate that could be funded from the levy. Is that correct? Do I understand that? So the actual, paying to get onto the ballot and then there's the consultancy for that.
It's usually paid for simultaneous with the election proceedings, not coming out of the levy. In the future, if you had a levy, you could use some of your levy dollars to pay for that work to renew your levy.
Before you have any, you can't.
Correct.
Okay.
And I understand that there's certainly be costs associated with, if you lost the first round and going, getting on the next ballot. But there's nothing that precludes us from, if we got something on the primary ballot and it didn't pass, like from going for the general election.
Yes.
It's really not ideal.
You could go put a levy on every single ballot consecutively for a new issue. If you have an existing levy, then there are certain times when you can put a renewal on the ballot or a replacement. And the state legislature with the state budget is currently changing what types of levies are available for political subdivisions. So moving forward, there'll probably be fewer options. It'll mostly be, if you're seeking a levy, that it'll be for a certain amount. If you want to increase that levy, you'll have to do an additional levy, because every levy, if it's not a bond levy or a fixed sum levy, is subject to reduction factors. So you'll be collecting the same amount initially that you will throughout the time period of that levy because of reduction factor to prevent you from getting windfalls from inflation from property values. So usually if you have a levy, an existing levy, when you're able to put it on the ballot the year before it expires for collection. And the year it expires.
All right. You did the information. Did you have anything particular?
No, the only other thing I was going to say is, again, we've had all the meetings here in Sunbury. We had talked about trying to move them around. Part of the reason we didn't move the last couple were because I think Berkshire did not have the capability to do the remote in. So I don't know, I was just offering up. I mean, if we think we're all going to be here on the 31st, do we want to go to a different location for the meeting? We're happy to host, but we also want to allow the opportunity for Berkshire and Galena to host as well. So
I do not know if Galena has the capability.
yeah, I was going to say they probably don't. So I'm saying if we know somebody's going to remote in, then we probably ought to keep those here at Sunbury. But if we think we've got full attendance, that probably opens the door to being able to move the meeting around a little bit.
So then the question is, is anybody expecting?
Yes.
Not.
I'll be here.
So everybody
I'll be here.
personal. Okay.
Likewise.
All right. Well, hey, how about that, Berkshire? You want to host?
More than happy to.
All right.
That I can walk across the streets.
July 31st.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll still put together the agenda. I'll just work with Tyler to make sure that it's, got the appropriate address and anything else we need to have with it, but still look to me to kind of help put the agenda together. So. Move to Berkshire. I don't have anything.
Any
I'm good.
And just by way of update, I think our bank account is good to, I
Is
think
it?
they're
I'm not-
opening. I got all the paperwork to them. They
Okay.
did from me. I got an email this morning saying that they would get to working on opening it. So I'm not sure how long that will take, but I think we'll be in a position before too long to be able to actually have an active bank account and, get some of our funds transferred to
Great.
that. I did also receive, another quote on insurance. It was quite a bit more lengthy than the other quote I got. So I've just been trying to understand the differences. One was significantly more expensive than the other, but it seems to include more appropriate coverages. So I have a few more questions on that. That's where that stands.
If you need any help from me, just let me know.
But
I make a motion to adjourn.
should.
Someone's gonna second.
Second.
Mr. Elliott.
Yes.
Ms. Watson.
Yes.
Ms. Sabata.
Yes.
Mr. Muzakio.
Yes.
Ms. Greiger.
Yes.
Mr. Coy.
Yes.
Yes, we are adjourned.
Apple every time.